man who made these statements was obviously a paradox. He was sometimes shunned by the art world, and often worshipped by mathematicians. Yet, he was not a mathematician. He was an artist. He was. Maurits Cornelius Escher was born in 1898 in Leeuwarden, the Netherlands. His family soon moved to the city of Arnhem, which was where he grew up and went to school. School was a struggle for young Malk, as his family called him. In fact, as biographer Bruno Ernst states, the whole of his school days was a nightmare, the one and only gleam of light being his 2 hours of art each week. After he failed his high school exams, his father had the idea that he could use his art ability and become an architect. Escher was enrolled in the School of Architecture and Decorative Arts in the city of Haarlem, also in the Netherlands. In less than a week, this elaborate plan fell apart. Escher admired his graphic arts teacher, Samuel Jesrun de Mesquita, and with de Mesquita's support, he switched his studies to graphic arts. His father, himself an engineer, may not have been pleased, but he always supported his son. Here is Escher's portrait of his father at age 92. Under de Mesquita's instruction, Escher began his journey to becoming a master woodcutter and printmaker. In 1922, Escher left school, but before he did, he produced this interesting woodcut print of 8 heads. It was definitely a sign of things to come. It is also related to the next thing that happened in 1922. Escher visited a building called the Alhambra in southern Spain for the first time. The Alhambra is considered a Moorish masterpiece. The Moors were Muslims from northern Africa who settled in the Iberian Peninsula during the Middle Ages. The castle, and especially the tiles that decorated its walls, made a huge impression on Escher. The tile designs are tessellations. Tessellations are patterns or shapes that are contiguous without leaving spaces and without overlapping. This word, tessellation, will be forever associated with Escher. Meanwhile, 1922 was an eventful year for Escher in other ways. He met his future wife, Jetta, in Italy. They married in 1924 and eventually had 3 sons. They lived for many years in Italy, where Escher was so happy because he loved the Italian landscape. He concentrated on this landscape in his art and depicted the dramatic Mediterranean surroundings that he so enjoyed. Sadly, fascism was on the rise in Italy in the 1930s. Escher could not tolerate this, even though he was not a political person. The final straw was when his son was forced to wear the fascist youth uniform to school. Escher knew that he and his family would have to leave Italy. Ironically, it was Escher's move away from his favorite place that caused him to evolve as an artist. Disappointed with the dullness of his surroundings in Switzerland, Belgium, and eventually Holland, he was forced to turn to what he called his inner visions. It turned out that the pictures that were in his mind were extraordinary. He was compelled to escape the dreariness of Northern Europe and return to the Alhambra along with Jetta in 1936. He returned with pages of notes, and his work with tessellations begins to explode creatively. He called these tessellations regular divisions of the plane, and about them he said, "This is the richest source of inspiration that I have ever struck, nor has it yet dried up." Tessellations have always been rooted in geometric principles, but before Escher they were almost always exclusively done with geometric shapes. Escher took these same principles, but used them with natural forms. This gave them new meaning as shapes grew into living creatures that often morphed into other creatures. Sometimes these creatures escaped the pages they were on. Sometimes they even escaped their own dimension. Although he experimented with tessellations his entire life, his early work with them concluded with his mural-sized metamorphosis woodcuts. The print that was most famous from this era is Day and Night, which shows off all of his techniques and displays his thoughts about opposites being connected. Along with his interest in tessellation, Escher was fascinated by optical illusion. Here in Still Life in Street from 1937, the viewer is forced to ask, is this an infinite street or a finite table? Then, as he turned inward, his ideas became more and more complex. In the 1940s, Escher began to further test the limits of visual art by creating what people came to call impossible worlds. Perhaps these imaginary worlds were better than the real one, which was still gripped by war. Tragically, the life of Escher's mentor, De Mesquita, ended in a German concentration camp. Escher found his home ransacked and collected the prints strewn about for an exhibition. He was always to keep this photo of him hanging up in his studio. Post-war, Escher made this New Year's card, which says, in Dutch, "We will come out of it." It refers to getting over the horror of war. It is notable for its striking use of perspective, an idea which is very important to his impossible worlds. The lithograph, high and low, is a sort of vertical panorama. Two identical scenes on top of one another, each one from a different perspective. Is the ceiling the floor, or is the floor the ceiling? In House of Stairs, the same scene is repeated 3 times, all from different perspectives, but yet all coming together to create a single scene. The creatures in House of Stairs are curl-ups. They are an invention of Escher's, which he used in many prints. Whether the curl-ups are going up or going down the stairs is a matter of point of view. In relativity, the figures are all existing in the same world, but yet are existing in different gravitational universes. For example, these 2 figures are walking in the same direction on the same staircase, yet one is walking up and one is walking down. Impossible, but seemingly real through the talents of M.C. Escher. Here is renowned mathematical physicist Roger Penrose with Relativity. It actually holds a special place in Penrose's own history. Penrose first became acquainted with Escher when the International Congress of Mathematicians was held in Amsterdam in 1954, and Penrose was just a student. Coincidentally, a museum there was exhibiting Escher's work at the same time. When Penrose spied Day and Night on the cover of a lecturer's catalog and inquired about it, he was directed to the museum. Penrose was completely blown away by Escher and particularly relativity. Inspired by this impossible world, he was determined to create his own impossible object, and he did. The famous Penrose triangle, or tribar, which can be drawn, but which is actually an illusion, was created specifically in response to Escher's art. Here is Penrose, along with his cousin, drawing and explaining his triangle.
When you try and turn it into 3 dimensions, you get this. It's just a completely nonsensical jumble of bars, isn't it? But the trick is, if you rotate it and you get it to exactly the right spot, it suddenly clicks into shape, doesn't it?
Indeed.
In addition, Penrose got his father, Lionel Penrose, interested in Lionel create the Penrose stairs as his impossible object. Like the tribar, these endless steps going up, and yet in a loop, are an illusion of reality. They exist only in our minds.
Again, it's a one-eye only job.
Well, one eye of mine works better than the other. So
and you can then plod all the way round up the stairs incessantly.
They published their results in the British Journal of Psychology in 1958 and credited Escher as their inspiration. Escher read the article, and now he was inspired by them. He responded to the Penroses not only by letter, but also artistically. He created Waterfall, composed of 3 tribars, as a response to Roger, and Ascending and Descending as a response to Lionel. Other impossible worlds include concave and convex, which again shows what we think is one way only is only just a matter of perception, and Belvedere with its famous inside-outside ladder. Look closely at the little guy in the corner. Escher did a separate woodcut of him. It has been used to illustrate the concept of thinking outside the box. In addition, you will see that there is no ordinary box. It's another impossible object. Escher continued to think outside the box, and continued to pursue mathematical ideas without having any mathematical training or doing a single equation. He loved crystallography and experimenting with the Platonic solids, the solids with all regular faces. In typical Escher fashion, he did not just draw, or in his case, print them. He pushed them beyond their usual limits. He intersected them, he stellated them, or turned each of their surfaces into pyramids. He filled them with beasts who tried to escape them. In the famous print, Order and Chaos, he contrasts the perfection of a crystal with the uneven and broken objects around it. The art world often found Escher too orderly, too planned, too perfect, but Escher's own ideas were very complex. He said, "We adore chaos because we love to produce order." What Escher loved was the never-ending pursuit of the answers to questions about the nature of reality. He always continued with his plane divisions or tessellations, and, after being influenced by the mathematician Coxeter, he tried to tessellate in hyperbolic space, or space with a negative curvature. It is thought that the reason he kept pushing this envelope to the extreme is because of his quest for the understanding of infinity. This search for infinity led to another of his subjects, Mobius strips, closed loops which have only one side and one edge, even though they appear to have two. Mobius strips can also look a lot like the symbol for infinity. In the lithograph, Print Gallery, he takes this concept of infinity to yet another new dimension. A boy is looking at a print in a print gallery, but the print he is looking at, which looks in the beginning like an ordinary village by the sea, actually becomes the very print gallery he is in. Therefore, he is looking at a print of himself at that very moment. It is mind-bending, and to achieve this illusion, Escher actually curves space by turning it in a clockwise spiral, which causes it to grow in size. To represent the absolute infinity that this spiraling will lead to, he actually leaves a hole in the middle. There, he has placed his signature initials. Printmaking itself is actually potentially infinite. This has to be one of the reasons why he chose printing over drawing or painting. It is said that he never limited the number of his prints, something artists frequently do to increase their value. If there was a request for another copy, Escher always printed one, something he did alone, without help, by using the traditional methods he had always used. Although he later excelled at making lithographs and mezzotints, he always returned to woodcutting. His final print, Snakes, was a woodcut in which he was clearly still reaching for this idea of infinity. Here he is at work on it. M.C. Escher died in 1972 at age 74. Really, his death was just the start of the Escher explosion in popular culture. From scholarly books to album covers, films such as Labyrinth and Inception, and computer simulations, Escher can be found everywhere. Even late-night talk show hosts refer to him, although Escher, who was proper and old school, would not have approved of their language. On the internet, Escher is everywhere, and so are new mashups of his work. All of this is due to how he continues to spark the imagination of so many people. In all the craziness, however, sometimes it's easy to forget how elegant and classic his own actual work was. Although much of his work seems to fall into categories, some of it, like the man himself, falls into no category at all.